We'll start with my presentation. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you all about the rural support schemes, and every year the schemes change from year to year. So basically the schemes that I'm going to talk about is based on the 2020 rural support schemes. They were initially launched in 2016 to support the revitalisation of rural Ireland, and they're funded by the Department of Rural Community Development and administered by the local authorities nationwide. The rural support schemes are basically CLÁR, Town and Village Accelerated Measure, and Outdoor Recreation Infrastructure. So the first one up is CLÁR, and CLÁR is a targeted investment programme for rural areas that aims to provide funding for small infrastructure projects in areas that experience disadvantage. The aim of CLÁR is to support the sustainable development of identified CLÁR areas, just to attract people to live and work there. It applies only to areas that are designated as rural disadvantaged based on the 2006 census. So in order to qualify for any CLÁR grant, you have to be in the disadvantaged areas. In 2020 now, in that scheme, it changed compared to 2019 scheme, but in 2020, a lot of the measures under the rural support schemes were changed to accommodate for COVID-19. So in 2020, 90% of the project costs were funded up to a maximum of 50,000, whichever was the lesser for Measure 1 and for Measure 2. The remaining 10% of the balance was funded then through the local authority or else to the various community groups. The 2020 CLÁR programme was delivered through 3 separate measures, and there's a little diagram there just to give you an input or an idea as to how they were broken down. Measure 1 and Measure 2 were given out were dealt with through the local authorities, and Measure 3 was between the community groups or the state agencies and the department directly. They were dealt with directly. So basically what we do in 2020, or every year in around March, April, May, we advertise for expressions of interest, basically where community groups or agencies would apply to the councils, express their interest in a project that they might have in mind. And they could, if they are aware that they're in a CLÁR scheme, well and good, put down the CLÁR programme. And if it fits in under Measure 1 or Measure 2, well then that's where the project application will be looked at. But if it's a thing that you have no idea whether your project will come under CLÁR, Town and Village or Outdoor Recreation, just put down the project that you have in mind, and once it comes into the council, we will look then at that stage. We have a subgroup who will look at all the projects that have come into us, and we'll fit them in under whatever category, either CLÁR, Town and Village or Outdoor Recreation. So this is just really to give you a flavour of what are the requirements under CLÁR. So we'll go on to the next page now, and we'll see a little bit more detail of Measure 1. So Measure 1, basically, these are an example of the projects that are eligible under CLÁR. So number 1, it has to be in the rural disadvantaged areas. And if it is, it has the types of projects that will fund is outside schools, for example. You may have seen under various schools, flashing amber lights, safety measures, digital safety signs, pedestrian crossings, car park facilities. And you'll get these presentations afterwards, and you can keep this as an idea whether your project would fit in under Measure 1 or not. So that's Measure 1. Then Measure 2 is on the next page, and we have here under Measure 2, this is for community recreation areas. And under Measure 2, community groups can apply then for these type of measures like outdoor electricity connection, outdoor drinking water fountains, seating area and picnic areas, barbecue covered areas, car and bike facilities, outdoor toilet bins, these kind of things. And the main thing about it is last year we were given a time frame of about 8 months to complete the project. And then eligible groups and local development community companies and local authorities were eligible to apply for this. Schools were in 2019, but not in 2020, for the simple reason all projects either under CLÁR, outdoor recreation, town and village, they all have to be available to the public without an appointment. These are public funded projects, and therefore they should be available without anyone having to book an appointment or pay a fee, and that's the whole objective. So 3A then, these projects, 3A and 3B, are totally dealt with between a group, and their application goes directly through to the department. There's no local authority as a middleman. So they're the idea. You can see the 3A measures there, and it's for Meals on Wheels and link services, and that was brought in 2020. Again, this could all change this year, but this is just based on what we have available to us at this point in time. The schemes are become available then during the summer. So we'll move on then to 3B, and 3B then is was again community groups or organisations dealing with the department directly. And 3B last year dealt with mobility and cancer care transport funding. So for the likes of somebody providing respite or mobility issues, it was dealt with directly between the organisations like LARC or whatever, and then straight through to the department. Their application went to them. So you can read that in your own time. And we'll move on then to town and village. So town and village then was always in place, and last year they brought in town and village acceleration measures. So this is considered the main scheme. So in 2020, town and village renewal was tailored to address the emerging challenges associated with COVID-19. And the following are a list of projects that were considered eligible. Now, not limited to these, but these are just a flavour of what was available. So projects that responded to COVID-19 challenges and aided economic social recovery over the medium term, development of initiatives that encouraged town centre living, initiatives that attracted increased footfall into a town or village, including those associated with tourism. These were a big ask. These are the things what town and village wanted. They wanted to be able to link people that would be normally outside the village, especially tours, bringing them into the village so that to help the economic growth within these small towns and villages. Branding and promotion of town and village that attracted new customers and business investment, town safety and accessibility enhancements, car parking improvements, projects that supported improvement of broadband connection points, enterprise and remote working hub facilities. They were big last year on remote working. So if you had a project that met those requirements, more than likely you would have been approved. Provision and enhancement of local recreation facilities, town parks, walking trails linked to the town and village. There was one granted last year for linking Tullinally Castle out into Castle Pollard. So they're just an idea of the main scheme, and shopfront enhancements as well. So the rate of aid then on the town and village in 2020 as a once-off measure was 90% of the project costs under town and village scheme, and the 10% remaining was matched by the local authority or the community groups. And the minimum, the grants available under this scheme was range from 20,000 for a medium scale one up to 100,000, and then there was possibly one grant made available for 200,000. The indicative project completion timeframe was 18 months for town and village main scheme. So the acceleration measure then is next up, and the acceleration measure only came out last year in 2020, and there was two types of projects or elements to it, and basically it was social distancing and increased footfall into the town and village. They were the two areas that the department asked the local authorities to concentrate on. And the provision under the social distancing measure, the provision of equipment or carrying out of works to temporarily repurpose pedestrianised public areas to facilitate street outdoor trading or to make these areas temporarily weatherproof by use of marquee or awnings. So there was a few villages that got approved for the outdoor structures where people, the concept was that people would buy in the shops and sit down in outdoor eatery areas and enjoy their food. And this was helping social distancing and also helping increase footfall. The development of central online platform for town and village where consumers could continue to shop local, by virtually visiting the shops in town and village through a single website. So that we had one approved for that as well. Provision of local centralised drive-through facilities for items such as online or over-the-phone purchases. Then in relation to increased footfall, branding, marketing of town and villages, painting and improving shop front facades and other major minor and public realm improvement work, seating, planting, landscaping, that kind of thing. Investment in adapting public areas, footpaths to make them accessible to all ages and abilities. So that's what was considered under the accelerated measure. So that'll give you a little idea of it. You'll have these notes anyway, so you can read in your own time afterwards. Then for town and village, the grants that were made available for town and village was 25,000 per project, with the possibility of an increase to 40,000. We got one project fund last year for 40,000, and that was for Mullingar. 90% of the cost was funded of the project, and 10% was remaining by the local authority or community groups. And the indicative project completion timeframe was 3 to 4 months. It was very short. It had to be a ready-to-go project. So then outdoor recreation infrastructure, this has been part of the rural sports schemes for years, but the main thing again to remember is it has to be open to the public without an appointment. It's funded by the Rural and Community Development, and Fáilte Ireland came on board last year, and administered by the local authorities. The objectives of the scheme was to provide funding for the development of outdoor recreational infrastructure and for the necessary repair, enhancement and promotion of existing outdoor recreation infrastructure in the countryside. Now, there were a lot of applications last year that considered themselves eligible under this scheme, but you have to remember it has to be open to the public without an appointment, and generally speaking, no fees. You can't be charging fees for people, membership or anything like that. So it has to be like a trail out in the countryside. The types of projects typically funded by the scheme include trails, walkways, cycleways, greenways, blueways, and mountain access routes. The projects that provide outdoor recreation infrastructure are encouraged, including those resulted in an improved access to a recreation facility for older persons and for people with disabilities. Given the potential impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the Irish economy and the tourism sector in particular, projects that displayed a specific tourism or other sectorial impact that aided economic recovery were encouraged. The 2020 scheme delivered under 3 measures, and the level of funding, project scale and eligible applicants were varied under each measure. So there's 3 measures under ORI, as it's known as. Measure 1 funded 20,000 within about 9 months to complete the project. The eligibility were for small scale projects with objectives the objectives of the scheme. This included the upkeep and repair of already established trails, walkways, cycleways, etc., and improving access to recreation facilities. And the eligible applicants were the local authority and local development company. Measure 2 then is for more of a medium-sized scale, and there was a higher amount granted of 200,000 for these projects, and there was an 18-month time frame for that project for Measure 2. Eligible activity then included medium-sized projects in line with the objectives of the scheme. This included the development of trails, walkways, cycleways, local greenways, blueways, and other recreation facilities, or extensions to already established trails, walkways, etc. Projects also include works for the enhancement, repair and promotion of such infrastructure or improved access to recreation infrastructure. And the only eligible applicants here are ourselves, local authorities. Measure 3 then is for the bigger jobs, the large scale repair, upgrade or new strategic trail amenity development. And these projects were funded up to 500,000 with approximately 8 months to complete the project. If planning permission was in place for these projects and ready to go, all the better, would help, but wouldn't stop you from applying, or if you had a project in mind, don't let that stop you from applying. Large-scale projects in line with the objectives of the scheme. This included projects such as the development of large-scale recreation infrastructure or resources to complete a larger scale, longer-term development, as well as significant repair and maintenance on already established trails, walkways, cycleways, greenways or blueways. and the eligible applicants are the local authorities and state agencies. So that'll give you an idea when you read it in your own time whether your project is eligible for an outdoor recreation scheme or not. And by all means, you can contact me afterwards as well. So then the grant aid mainly mentioned there was 90% of the project costs, and 10% of the remaining then was funded by the community group or local authority. And then again in 2020, because of COVID, it was increased to 90%, the funding. It was previously 80%. And there's no guarantee that it will be available, or the amount will be available again this year. It changes every year. The following types of projects and activities in particular were not supported under the scheme. So just to bear these in mind: purchase of land, refurbishment and construction of buildings, sports grounds, playgrounds, multi-use games areas, walking or running tracks located in a confined space, example around a sports ground, pitches, playgrounds, or within other sports grounds. Marked street trails, walkways and cycleways within a town or village wouldn't be eligible either. Activities that did not comply with the definition of countryside or outdoor recreation as set out above were not eligible. So bear that in mind. And there's a picture there of Tullinally Castle, the access route that was provided under the scheme last year. So my email address is on the next slide. And by all means, you can contact me by email if you're in doubt. But as I said earlier on, we will be applying, we will be advertising next month now in April. It'll be on our website, it will be in the paper, and it will be advertised to the PPN as well. That we'll be looking for expressions of interest. It'll be a very basic online form, and you can submit it online, and then we will look at all applications then when the schemes are announced in the summertime, and we will try and marry and get as many projects applied for as we see fit and as possible. So I hope that helps you all in a little bit in knowing what projects are available, what grants are available, and whether your projects will be considered or not. But if you have any doubt, submit them on the EOI and we'll take it from there. Thanks very much for your time, and thanks very much for logging in.
Thank you, Mary. That's very comprehensive. And as said earlier on, all of these slides will be available as PDFs if you didn't have a chance to take them down there on the PPN website and on Westmeath County Council's website as well. Our second speaker is Teresa Gagan from Westmeath Community Development, who's going to speak to us on LEADER. Please, Teresa.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Bridget. Thanks very much for having me on here tonight. It's great to see so many people embracing modern technology and logging on tonight. It's great. As Bridget said, my name is Teresa Gagan. I'm working with Westmeath Community Development, and I'm going to talk to you tonight about the Rural Development Programme, the LEADER Transitional Programme from 2021 to 2022. For those of you who don't know, the LEADER programme is administered by the Westmeath Local Community Development Committee in partnership with Westmeath Community Development, who's the implementing partner, and Westmeath County Council, who is the financial partner. So just a little bit of background to LEADER. It has been supporting communities and enterprises for over 20 years in County Westmeath. This transitional programme was announced earlier this year, and it will run for 2021 and 2022. The budget, which was provided by government, is €503,469 for projects. And the whole aim of this programme is to bridge the gap between the old LEADER programme that's just finished and the new LEADER programme, which we would hope will commence in 2023. That's when we expect that it will commence. Some of the main focuses of the LEADER transition programme will be to support communities in a post-COVID environment, particularly those that have not received LEADER funding previously, to assist the development of new and existing rural businesses in rural tourism, craft creatives and the food sectors, to support eligible rural businesses in a post-COVID Brexit environment. It's a particularly tough time out there for businesses as well as communities. To assist communities to maximise broadband and the digital economy. I suppose the last 12 months have really thrown everybody into the deep end, and to embrace what we can do online, and I think we're all adapting to that. So this programme puts a real focus on that as well. And then to assist communities to develop environmental projects that are related to the green economy, biodiversity and the water. water conservation. So these main focuses dovetail really nicely into the local development strategy, which the last leader programme operated off as well. So these are the main themes that both community groups and private individuals can access grant aid under. So the first theme will be economic development, enterprise development and job creation. The second theme is social inclusion, and then the final theme is rural environment. So to look a little bit more closely into these, the first theme of economic development, enterprise development and job creation focuses on the sub-themes. There's 4 sub-themes. So the first one is rural tourism. So looking at the water-based activities, outdoor recreation and heritage-based tourism products. We'll also be looking in particular with the transition programme, supporting tourism providers to diversify and to combat the effects of Brexit and COVID-19. So looking a lot more at home tourism market that may not have been such a big thing before, but this year in particular, that's where the tourists are going to come from. The second theme looks at enterprise development, so looking at the foods, crafts, creative industries, agri-diversification and renewable energy. This will focus on the creation of jobs in the climate change and the green economy, as well as helping businesses to alleviate some of the adverse effects of COVID and Brexit, and to be innovative and to kind of diversify into new markets as the need has arisen. Rural towns, I suppose, is an area that communities have really worked hard on in the last couple of years, and access grants available there. So working on enhancement works in their communities, the development of recreational spaces and community facilities. With the transition programme, there will be a real focus on areas in Westmeath and communities that haven't accessed funding under the 2014 to 2020 programme. We'll really be looking at projects that have addressed the current difficulties that we're in terms of COVID, and projects that really have the green economy and climate change at the core. So there'll be a good emphasis on them. And then the final theme is broadband. This will focus on ICT training and small scale equipment. Now, it's not looking at large scale infrastructure. That's what the National Broadband Plan will be, but it's hoping to complement that and looking at the broadband connection providers in different areas that have been guaranteed to receive high speed broadband this year. I know Street is one area in County Westmeath that already has it. So we'll be hoping to focus and support them communities to apply for small scale equipment that will promote remote working in their areas, that people can come and access when the time is right and it's safe to do so, obviously, that they can access internet access there and other home office. So on to the next theme there, Ursula, please. So the second theme then is social inclusion, and there's 2 sub-themes within this. So the first is basic services for hard to reach communities. Again, the focus will be on communities that haven't accessed leader funding in the last programme, and to support them communities to build the capacity to apply for leader grant aid, to develop sustainable community and recreational infrastructure in their areas. And the second sub-theme is rural youth. So we will have a continued emphasis on improving youth cafes, clubs and social and recreational activities for the young people. And then the final theme is rural environment. So there's 3 sub-themes within this, and I suppose this theme is really important, and it's something we really do have to focus on as a county as a whole in the coming years. So the first sub-theme is the protection and sustainable use of water resources. I know Basil is going to talk a little bit more about kind of potential projects and stuff that he has identified, but we can support projects like that for grant aid, as well as providing education and awareness on protection and conservation of water. The second sub-theme is the protection and improvement of local biodiversity. So there will be an emphasis on education and training and awareness for community groups around what we can do best, particularly tidy towns groups as well, and what kind of projects we can do to promote biodiversity in our communities. And then the final sub-theme is the development of renewable energy. So education and awareness for communities is hugely important. And there's also scope there to support feasibility studies on the production and use of green technologies within the community, and to support projects that promote climate change and support the green economy as well. So the transition programme itself We are currently accepting expressions of interest for grant aid. The programme itself won't start until the 1st of April, but that's not stopping anybody who has an interest to get in touch, and we can send you out an expression of interest to fill in. We will be making a public call for proposals in March. So in the next couple of weeks, you will see something on our own website. We'll circulate it through PPN, and it'll be in the local newspapers, and we'll also issue it through social media and the usual sources. The details will be advertised on that. There will be specific calls for specific types of projects, but just overall, I suppose this programme, the budget is a lot smaller than we would have done in the past. So there is a maximum grant aid available that will be €100,000 for maximum project. Community groups and private individuals can apply for up to 75% grant aid, or depending on their project size, obviously. For capital projects, feasibility studies can apply for up to 90% grant aid, and then there's up to 100% grant aid available for training projects. Some of the usual things apply for LEADER. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, but by all means come in and chat to us and we'll talk to you about them. But for capital projects or infrastructure projects, the applicant would need to be in ownership of the facility, of the building or the land they wish to apply for, or have a long-term lease on the piece of land. Additionally, they will be required to apply for planning permission as well, if that is a requirement or an exemption from it. There's some of the big things that would need to be done first before making a LEADER application. So these are our contact details here. We have an office in Mullingar and Athlone. Now, with current COVID restrictions, we're not meeting anybody in the offices, but by all means, give us a call. My email address is there. My colleagues Bernie and Peter are there as well. Please feel free to give us a call and get in touch, and we can go through more detail with you. There's no problem with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Very comprehensive, and again, the slides themselves kind of speak for themselves, but we certainly will have them, including the recording, available. Our third speaker, please, is Basil Mannion, who is the Community Water Officer from the Local Authority Water and Community Office. Basil.
Hi, Bridget. Hi, everybody. Hello.
Oh, hi, Basil. We can hear you now. We didn't for the last couple of minutes or a couple of seconds even.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I don't know what happened there. There are glitches here in South of Scotland. Yeah, thanks very much for the invite, Bridget. It's great to be involved in a very well populated event tonight. As you mentioned, I'm the Community Water Officer for Westmeath, Offaly and Laois. Our funding, and what we try to do is to set groups up with whatever funding option is best suited to them under water, biodiversity and climate change. Our ultimate goal is to, I suppose, improve the water quality of our natural waters. And in doing this, we have to try and get communities to put more of a value on the local waters. So next slide there, please. Yeah, so I suppose over the last year, we've all become more in tune with our environment when we can get out, and we've been in and out and out of lockdown. So there seems to be a lot more emphasis placed on our mental health and our overall well-being, and that has brought a bigger, I suppose, interaction for us with our local environment, and that includes biodiversity, water quality in our local environment, and I suppose climate change, what we see when we're out and about. So it's never been a better time to be getting involved in projects with our local environment. Next slide there, please. So with the Local Authority Waters Programme, we have our own fund. It's called a Community Water Development Fund. We've had it, I suppose, for the last 4 years since we came into existence, and it's grown steadily in both the funding available and the amount of applications from community groups in every county all over the country. At the moment, it's up at 360,000 nationally. It's gone up from 240 last year. So that's a big positive for us. So what we're trying to do, as I stressed, is to get communities to put a value on water. So in order to do that, we have to get out and get our feet wet and actually do things with our local water environment, our biodiversity, and I suppose there's an impact there on climate change as well. So the type of projects we'll be looking at were capital projects such as wildlife conservation, restoring habitats, fish passage issues, invasive species, tree planting, nature-based solutions in terms of sustainable urban drainage and natural systems. We also fund awareness raising events, information initiatives, publications, videos, and also we look at promoting overall public awareness through education events, biodiversity days, surveys, training, water conservation initiatives, and whatever in we can get with the community. If they have any sort of a project with a water team, we're there to try and help them as much as we can. And the list of fundings that I'll go through now in the next few minutes is, I suppose, for us to match the community with the best available funding to suit them and try and help them out that way. So our grants under the Community Water Development Fund would range from 500 to 5,000 for the smaller, 5,000 to 10,000, and some of the bigger ones then up to 25,000. And we also have, I have as a community water officer, an awareness fund where we can help groups maybe book a hall, pay for some food after a meeting, book a speaker, things like that will help groups get on the road to doing something meaningful with their environment. So some of the funds we work with are the IFI funds, the funding for fisheries projects, and there's also a very, very good fund there, the Midlands Fishery Fund, which opens every year. There's a group at the moment, the Lough Trout Preservation Society, who are doing great work with some funding they've received, and they've applied for more funding this year in relation to Lough. So they're always a good outlet for funding for us with our group. You can click on there, Ursula, please. Once more there, yeah, that's great, thanks. Waterways Ireland, we'd be keen to work with them. The national parks have a Peatlands Community Engagement Scheme, which is rolling out quite substantial funding every year. We have the Forest Service, we work closely with them and Teagasc in terms of their native woodland scheme, and they have a very good scheme there, the Woodland Environmental Fund, and the Neighbourhood scheme as well is quite suitable for communities that want to plant native species in native woodlands. We'd also be keen to work with the OPW, and they're coming more on board with community type projects, as well as the EPA, which would be research-based funding, and the Marine Institute as well for coastal counties, which would be research-based as well. Next slide there, please, Ursula. So grants that are rolling on would include the Environment and Nature Fund, which is directly related to biodiversity action plans. Also, in partnership with the EPA, you have Sustainable Communities, looking at the circular economy. That funding is, we're promised, is opening up in 2021. We have another organisation there, it's a kind of a philanthropic organisation. One of the pillars there would be community development. What's particularly specific to us would be protection and promotion of the natural environment. So there's some substantial funding there available as well. Next slide, Ursula, please. So some of the smaller pots we're looking at, I suppose, endangered species and reduction in biodiversity that we're well aware of, I suppose. Conservation Insight grants are available there, 3,000 to 10,000, running up to a maximum of 20,000 euros. We have last year this Irish Naturalists funding came on board, and I know we had a number of groups that applied for it. Some were successful, some were not, unfortunately. But it's a good scheme, and it concentrates more on field work and conference training around biodiversity and particular aspects of biodiversity and knowledge sharing, and can lead to publication of reports or your findings on a particular research project. So there's some small funding there available under that. Next slide there, please. So again, we'd be keen to work with Teresa and Peter there with LEADER. And our two, I suppose, teams that we're very, very keen to work under, Teresa has mentioned there, is protection and sustainable use of our water resources, so that while we have to use them, that we're protecting them going into the future. And also the protection and improvement of local biodiversity, which links in with the river corridors that cover our entire country and cover many of the landscapes of Westmeath, which are, I suppose, our rivers being corridors of life. So we're keen to protect those. Next click there, please, Ursula. And we've also worked closely on a national basis with Leader in developing a brochure that you would have seen there. And I'd encourage any community group to have a look at that, even if they don't get a project idea out of it, which they should, because there's quite a few in it. You'll come away much the better for having read it. It's a very, very good publication. Some state funds administered by the local authority. Mary's gone through some of them: CLÁR, Town and Village Renewal Scheme, the ORIS, the Social Enterprise Development Fund, and sometimes communities, we can gear these projects in terms of recreational funding. If it's, I suppose, recreation or overlooking a river or a stream or a wetland, we can link those together to put in a meaningful project. Next slide, please. And then some smaller plots that, again, we'd be well aware of, but it's no harm. Repetition is good. We'd have the Community Environmental Action Fund, which is the local agenda fund. We'd have heritage conservation grants, which I know are opening up at the moment. Festival and events grant, scheme of capital grants, tidy towns grant schemes, and we would work very closely with a lot of tidy towns groups across the country. Local improvement schemes, the private place schemes as well. Creative Ireland, which we're keen to get involved in, and some of the men's sheds across the country are very, very enthusiastic and doing some great work on the ground as well. Next slide there, please. So I know there's another list of some funding there, and again, if you look at some of the corporate responsibility issues there, the Coca-Cola Thank You Fund, Dormant Accounts Fund, the Tesco Community Fund, which is quite a good little fund as well. The Wind Farm Community Fund, wherever it's, I suppose, applicable to communities dealing with wind farms. So these are all funding opportunities that need to be tapped in. If you don't ask, you won't receive. Next slide there, please, Ursula. So match funding, I suppose, with our own fund, it's 75% of the application for costs in certain areas, especially conservation areas, prioritised areas for action. That would rise to 90%. So match funding is always an issue. So whether it's partnering up with a local business, some corporate sponsorship, which is growing in popularity, community engagement funds, voluntary labour, staff costs, these are all very, very applicable, and they need to be looked at. So again, maybe working with Martina and Credo and some of the other agencies that can supply some funding to cover the match funding aspect of your project. We'd be keen to help with that. I think you can click through a few of these here, Ursula. So again, knowing the relationship and linkages that you need to delve into and the networks that you need to access to make sure you have a good funding application. You need to know what permissions are required, obviously. Costs is huge, I suppose, and to be very specific in terms of what your application for funding, where the costs are coming from. And it's key with all these fundings that I and others have listed here that you go after the right funding. Now, you may need to go after one or more pots just to try and cover yourself, but it's key to go after the right funding, we believe. And I suppose COVID has upset the roadmap for the last while, but hopefully the second half of 2021 we'll be coming out of it, and there'll be a greater opportunity for the enthusiasm that all the groups have shown in lockdown to manifest itself in good, meaningful projects in terms of our natural water quality, our biodiversity, and the knock-on benefits then for climate change. So my contact details are on the next slide. I'm delighted to talk to anyone via email, via phone call. If we can help at all in terms of the type of projects that I've mentioned, I'd be glad to help. So thanks very much, Bridget, and thanks, Ursula, for your help.
Thank you, Basil. Very comprehensive again, and again, there's a wealth of information on those slides, particularly the last ones, which we covered a certain amount of them at the funding workshop on Tuesday, which is presently sitting on the PPN and the Westmeath County Council website as a recording. Our fourth speaker this evening is Dr. Isabella Donnelly, who's Senior Energy and Environmental Consultant with O'Reilly Stewart, and her topic of conversation is SEAI, which is the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. Isabella.
Hi, Bridget. Hi, all. And thanks a million, Bridget, for inviting me to talk this evening. So I'm going to just run through very quickly the SEC Network, Sustainable Energy Community Network, and the funds that are available there to communities to look at energy in the locality. So very, very quickly, definition of sustainable energy communities are where a group come together who are looking to be as energy efficient as possible, looking to see where it's possible to use renewable energies and how they can use their energy in the smartest way possible, and what smart energy technologies are there and are applicable for them. So we've typically been SECs have been kind of like subcommittees of tidy towns, but in the last year or so we've seen groups of people coming together very conscious of energy and the environment, setting up their own SECs independently of other groups. But it's great, it's been fantastic, and we're very appreciative to tidy towns and local community development groups who have supported the SEC network so far. So we just move on to the next slide there, and I'll just talk about some of the grants that are available. So when a group of people come together to set up a sustainable energy community, they can apply for the grant for an energy master plan. And really an energy master plan is just a roadmap for community of how they can get from their idea of sustainable energy to actually putting the map in place of how they'll actually get to their targets. It's 100% funded, this grant. It's level 4 different levels. So that is based on 2 factors. So the geographical region. So if it's a small village or a small street in a town, you would generally go for the level 1 grant. And then we also look at your typical energy spend. So I can help any communities that want to apply for this with doing that little bit of analysis to see what grant aid they should go for. So then, yeah, it goes up level 2, level 3, and level 4, again, based on typical geographical area you're going to consider and the energy spend, the average energy spend for the community. So again, it's 100% funded, and it is an important aspect to mention there is that it needs to be, it's retrospectively paid by the SEAI. So typically communities would upfront the money, but it will be about a month after that, then the SEAI will give you back the money. So that's just a key consideration communities need to know from the outset. So an energy master plan, what will you get for your grant aid? So as I said, it's a roadmap of how you can get to the ideas in a community's head about being more energy efficient and utilizing renewable energies. So when you have your energy master plan finished, you'll have a good understanding of how energy is used in your locality, where the wastage is, where the efficiencies can be applied to. You'll be able to prioritize the opportunities. So where are the best paybacks? Where's the best money going to be invested in to get the quickest return on investments? And you'll have at least a medium-term action plan of your next steps to avail of the opportunities. So again, just very briefly, an energy master plan. So it looks really at your baseline. So we can't improve what we don't measure at the moment. So it gives you an idea of your energy spend on energy in the locality. It looks to see what resources are local that can be utilized. And we have some really excellent examples of sustainable energy communities in Westmeath at the moment who are looking at their natural resources, looking at solar and looking at bioenergy and how they can rely on these local resources instead of importing fossil fuels. So a key output of your energy master plan is your register of opportunities. So as I mentioned, that is your breakdown of the next steps, whether it's retrofitting homes, whether it's a solar project, etc. And it gives a breakdown of costings, how long it'll take for payback for the locality, etc. So next slide then. So just some ideas around what your energy master plan, the recommendations they typically come out of energy master plans would be around kind of energy awareness and training. So simple awareness around inefficiencies around energy use, lighting upgrades, upgrading to your LEDs, etc., your fabric upgrades. We always say it's so important to have a fabric first approach, that you are not using more energy efficient technologies, but then wasting it by having drafty doors or drafty windows, etc. So looking at your fabric first and how you can utilize your energy in the most efficient way, and then looking at your system, so how you heat your home, how you manage the energy in your home, and then moving on to your renewables. And again, we have some really interesting projects where communities are looking at generating their own electricity and feeding it back into the grid, and it's a real momentum in the locality. And energy master plans are good at identifying if there is potential in a locality, maybe for a community-owned solar farm or some sort of 100% community-owned renewable energy project. So we can move on to the next slide there. So, okay, so if a community have gotten their energy master plan, they have the roadmap. So the next step then would be to apply to the community energy grant scheme. Now this grant scheme typically opens every autumn and closes in the early spring. So the end of January there, the last scheme closed. But if a community are thinking about applying to the next scheme, now is a good time to do the groundwork and get the energy master plan underway, so you have it to apply next autumn for it. So the community grant scheme offers grant aid ranging from 30% up to 80% for your energy upgrades. So that could be your retrofit, your deep retrofitting of homes, of community centres, of businesses, etc. And the grant aid ranging, so it will be 30% for, say, a private home or a private business, up to 50% then for a community centre or a not-for-profit building, and then up to 80% for fuel poor homes. So those would be homes with people who are in receipt of certain social welfare payments, can get up to 80% grant aid for their deep retrofits. Okay, so pop on to the next. So just an overview of the scheme up to 2019 and the scope of homes and businesses that were grant aided. So there was over 6,500 homes upgraded in the 4 years, and just over 2,000 businesses and community centres received the grant aiding. Now, there have been a lot of resources driven into this area in the last year or two, with the government's ambitions for over 500,000 homes to be retrofitted in the next couple of years. So it's we're really going to work on this base and try and improve those figures substantially going forward, but just gives an idea of the amount of money that was grant aided in the previous life of the scheme. So the last slide then. So if anybody has any questions or would like to inquire about setting up a sustainable energy community, or if there are any sustainable energy communities on this evening that want to maybe progress their projects and maybe look at their energy master plan application, I'd be delighted to take a call or an email on that. And then if any communities that don't have an SEC already, you can sign up to the network. And I am the county mentor for Westmeath, so I'm a resource there for communities that want to investigate setting up their sustainable energy community further. So thanks very much. I'll take any questions at the end.
Thank you, Isabella. Again, a very interesting and comprehensive presentation. A huge amount of possibilities there, I think, for communities as well. Certainly to look for and to find out more about. Our final speaker before the questions and answers is Peter Orman from Westmeath Community Development. And Peter is going to give us an overview of the volunteer supports in the volunteer centre. Please, Peter.
Good evening, Bridget, and thanks very much to yourself and the team in Westmeath PPN for their invitation here tonight. This evening I'm going to give a brief presentation on the Volunteer Centre, and I suppose in talking about the Volunteer Centre, I'm conscious that I'm talking to the converted, in that 99% of the people I think on this meeting here tonight work in some capacity for volunteers. And I suppose when I talk about Volunteer Centre, I suppose what we're looking at is making our society a much better place to live in, and that every person feels connected to the community through active participation in voluntary activities. And in the last 12 months, we really seen that coming to the fore with the COVID, particularly in the first lockdown. We had many people looking to come forward and make a difference to other people by volunteering their time. And then our mission statement then is to promote the value of volunteering and increase the range and quality of volunteering in Ireland. Just in terms of ourselves then, we have 2 offices. We're based in the offices of Westmeath Community Development in Mullingar and in Athlone. We have 4 staff members there: Mary Weldon, Carmel Cummins, Elizabeth Murray, and Eleanor Dowding. So I think one of the themes that came up here tonight, and it was mentioned a few times, is about linkages and relationships. And that's basically what the Volunteer Centre is about. So our key objectives is to raise awareness by volunteering by offering support services to the public and the community and voluntary organisations. We increase access to volunteering by increasing the capacity of community and voluntary organisations to engage volunteers and enhance their services. We also look at increasing the quality of volunteering. We want this experience to be positive for both parties. So we do that by promoting and developing best practice in volunteer management through information and training. So when someone comes to ourselves, we don't just talk about matching them to an organisation. We'd actually look at the qualities they have, where the best fit the organisation they have an interest in, and then we actually do some training to make sure that's a positive experience for both parties. In terms of, I suppose, what we do, and I always maybe look at the Volunteer Centre in terms of maybe something like a recruitment agency. We're matching volunteer opportunities to organisations. So we have a placement service. This is where we offer advice and support to individuals who have an interest in volunteering. We also then have a support officer who looks at supporting the organisations who involve volunteers and helping to deliver better quality volunteer opportunities and roles. An example of that might be, we might have a community group who might say they're looking for volunteers, but they don't actually go out and sell the idea, don't open up the organisation to other people. So we would encourage them organisations to define what they want from the volunteer, what assistance they want, and to see then is there any vacancy that they would like us to fill. And when an organisation comes to us, we actually register them on our system, and we actually promote that role through our website and through our social media. And so it's quite active the way it works. We also promote volunteering right around the county. We're a county-based organisation, so going back to our mission statement and our objectives, we want this to be inclusive for the whole county, that everyone that has a very positive experience in terms of volunteering. The Volunteer Centre also provides a guarded vetting service for groups who do not have access to their own liaison person. And again, that's a service that we offer. So the rules and regulations have changed in that in the recent past, but certainly if organisations or people wish to get guarded vetting for any members, we'd be quite happy to provide that assistance. And again, we provide training for community and voluntary groups specific to volunteering. So the whole, I suppose, area about that is we want it to be a very positive experience for both the organisations and the volunteer, and to make a real difference to people's lives as a result of the volunteering. Some of the opportunities that we've been involved in over the last number of months and indeed years, I suppose it's just like we'd have people looking for website designs, where a group or community group would like to get a website done, and they might come to ourselves and we would put out, say, is there an opportunity for someone that's maybe retired or has knowledge in this that would like doing that? So again, that's something we're doing. The befriending one is a quite interesting brief that we actually do, and that's basically, we might have a group, we might have, say, a social services group in the community who might be, and they might ring around, identify the people who are vulnerable, lonely in their community, and they would take on to ring people in the respective communities, and it's a very good service that's offering, and even some of our staff in Westmeath Community Development would take on that role at the moment as well. So there's different things like stewarding, activities, volunteers, fundraising, radio presenters, the work in the youth leaders. Some people do grinds. There's lots of different volunteer opportunities out there, and a lot of them are not, people mightn't think of them as volunteer opportunities, but there's many of them out there, and we promote them and advertise them on our social media and on our website. As a result, I suppose some online opportunities have arisen, I suppose, due to the change in technologies and also through COVID. And these opportunities are for people working at home. And the great thing about these online opportunities is it's for, when we put them up on our system and promote them, it's actually for the whole country. So you can be living in Athlone, Ballinaccarrig or whatever, and you could be helping someone in Donegal, Wexford, whatever. So it's actually a great opportunity. And if you have particular skills that you would like to share, certainly this is a great some great initiatives here. So just look at some of the ones we have here. We have the Online Leisure Buddies, HSE, that's an initiative. We have Online Grinds, Conversational English Online Tutor, Getting Started, Stay in Touch Tutor, that's Age Action. So again, we liaise with different many organizations and groups and see where their needs are. And at the moment, due to the demand on volunteering, and a lot of organizations are present due to COVID or closed down. It represents a challenge for us to keep up to demand of people looking to volunteer. So these roles that I've mentioned in terms of the online and working from home give people that opportunity to volunteer in different capacities that they wouldn't originally have been doing. So again, all these. We're also in the process of rolling out a reserve volunteer platform. And then again, this is for people who might like to volunteer in case there's an emergency or an event. So there might be, you might register for in case there was the Shannon was rising and houses were going to flood, if there was bad weather, if there was roads that were impassable or hills that were impassable and that people wanted to get out, or maybe some people in the elderly might be able to get out. And so you might never be called on, but you put your name forward, and that if that opportunity arose, that you will be there and we will contact you. We'd also, I suppose, when you register with ourselves as a volunteer, we would keep in touch with you on a regular basis to make sure that you're happy, that make sure that what you signed up for is what your expectations were delivered on. So that's something that we would have a member of staff that would contact you on a periodic basis to make sure that everything is going well, both for yourselves and for the organisation that you represent. Just in terms of last year, and I suppose with the COVID, a lot of the opportunities ceased. Certainly there was more created. We had 342 people registered with our centre last year, put their names forward to volunteer, and we placed those in 65 organisations right throughout the county. So that was quite a good number, and you can see how many hours that actually took. 7,034 hours, volunteers hours recorded by people here in Westmeath, volunteers. So that's a really good number. And I suppose, in other years, we'd be pushing that over the 10,000 mark. And then we had 214 applications for Garda vettings last year as well, and they were all processed. So look, I know I said at the start of the conversation, I'm speaking to the converted. So, I'm speaking to the converted here, but certainly if you know any organisations or any groups out there that are not-for-profit community-based organisations, we're there to help and assist you with your volunteers, and in terms of training, in terms of promotion, and in terms of your assistance, and in terms of seeking those people out. So thanks very much, folks. And if you have any questions for me later on, I'd be glad to take them. And our addresses and our contact details are there. So we have 4 members of staff, I said, so we all have the one number, and the receptionist will divert you to each member of staff. And so I'd be glad to take questions.
Thank you, Peter. Again, as you say, you're speaking to the converted, and a huge amount of people obviously at this are volunteers in their own right. We're now moving to the last